The wind screamed across the frozen flats, a shrill and ceaseless sound that scraped metal and bone alike. Carellan Outpost 17 had been dead for years. Its domes, once glowing with heat and light, now stood cracked and hollow, their reinforced. Shells splintered like eggshells scattered across the tundra. Snow had claimed every street and corridor, climbing high against doors that no longer opened. The air reeked of rusted steel and abandoned promises. Nyrie crouched in the shadow of a gutted coolant truck, her back pressed to its scorched hull. The thin silk wrap around her shoulders was never meant for weather like this ceremonial fabric, a memory from a life that felt like another lifetime. It clung to her body in tattered folds, barely shielding her or the small bundle cradled against her chest. Era's breathing was so shallow now that Nyrie found herself holding her own breath, straining to feel the faint rise and fall beneath the silk. Her hands were cracked, nails rimmed with blood where the cold had split them open. She had stopped feeling her fingers hours ago, but they still moved, clumsy and trembling, adjusting the wrap, tucking it tighter around the baby. Era's skin was pale, the kind of pale that frightened her, but the girl didn't cry. She hadn't for hours. Nyrie swallowed hard and forced her lips to move. The song rose like a whisper, thin and quivering, carried off almost instantly by the wind. It wasn't a song for the child anymore. Era was too weak to hear it. It was for herself, to keep her mind awake, to hold on to something soft in a world that had grown nothing but sharp. Her voice cracked as she hummed the tune she remembered. From the ritual mound on her homeworld, back before her bondmate died, back before this planet had turned against them. The wind howled. She kept singing. Every note felt like a battle. Her breath smoked in the freezing air, and for a moment she wondered if this was how it would end, kneeling in the snow with her daughter's life flickering out in her arms, unmarked and unseen. The registry wouldn't log them. No one would record their names. She and Era would vanish as if they had never existed. Then, under the sound of her voice and the metallic rasp of wind, she heard something. A crunch, soft at first, then again. A rhythm, slow and deliberate, cutting through the snow. Footsteps. Nyrie's heart lurched. Her entire body stiffened, breath trapped in her throat. Fear sharpened every nerve. Not scavengers, she prayed. Not the wild, starving men she had seen roaming the abandoned domes. She slid one hand away from the baby, fumbling for the jagged piece of scrap metal at her side. It was dull and rusted, hardly a weapon, but it was all she had. The steps grew. Closer. She pressed her back harder against the truck's wrecked hull, eyes narrowing at the shifting blur in the white haze. A shadow emerged, human-shaped, moving with unsettling calm. The figure stopped just meters away. The wind whipped between them, tossing powdery snow into the space where they might have spoken. The shadow stepped forward once, then again, and the shape of a man came into view. He was not armored, not uniformed, just a man with a thick, patched coat, it seems lined with rough stitches, and a heating unit strapped to his back. His face was half hidden by frost. Nyrie tightened her grip on the metal shard, her pulse thundering in her ears. The man raised his hands slowly, palms open, and knelt so she could see his face through the wind. His eyes were tired, watchful. He shrugged off his coat, holding it out toward her, but made no move closer. "I have heat," he said, his voice steady, low enough that the wind didn't carry it away. "If you want it." Nyrie's breath caught. Her fingers twitched. She didn't answer. But for the first time that day, something inside her stilled. The coat felt impossibly heavy in her hands. Nyrie didn't trust it, didn't trust the man who offered it, but the warmth radiating from its lining was undeniable, seeping through her numb fingers like a fragile thread of life. Her baby stirred. Faintly in the crook of her arm, a weak twitch of tiny fingers against her chest. The girl needed warmth now, or there would be nothing left to save. She pulled the coat around them both, the fabric rough against her cracked skin, and looked up, just in time to see the man turning away. He didn't wait for thanks, didn't ask for questions. He simply walked through the snow, leaving a trail of boot prints behind him like a line back to some hidden refuge. Nyrie hesitated, glancing over her shoulder at the white void stretching in every direction. There was nothing out here but death and silence. Following him was a risk. Not following him was certain death. She rose on trembling legs and followed. The walk was brutal. Each step felt like her bones were grinding against the ice inside her body. Her breath came in ragged bursts, frosting the inside of the coat. The man didn't slow or look back, but his pace wasn't hurried either. It was measured, almost deliberate, as though he knew she would follow. Through the whipping snow she caught glimpses of his face lined, weathered, marked by cold exposure but not cruel. They reached what looked like a derelict maintenance module, half buried under frost and debris. At first glance, it seemed no more alive than any of the other corpses of Carellan Outpost 17, but the man knelt, brushing snow from a panel, and keyed in a series of manual overrides. The hatch opened with a reluctant hiss, spilling out a thin wave of stale but warmer air. Inside was a small chamber, dimly lit by a cracked coil heater glowing orange under a mesh grate. The walls were layered with thermal foil and patched fabric. It wasn't warm, but it was bearable, like stepping out of a blizzard and into a dream of warmth. Nyrie hovered at the threshold, every muscle in her body coiled with distrust. Man stepped aside, leaving the way open, and gestured with one gloved hand. Inside. "The storm will bury this sector by nightfall," he said, his tone flat but not unkind. Nyrie ducked in, keeping her back to the wall as she shifted the baby closer to the heater. The girl's tiny breath ghosted in the faint warmth. A sign of life had eased something sharp and cold in Nyrie's chest. The man removed his heating pack and crouched across from her. He reached into a crate beside the wall and pulled out a ration bar and a small sealed pouch of water. He set them on the floor between them without a word, as if placing offerings before some wary animal. "Warm, not hot," he said. Indicating the water, Nyrie's fingers closed around the pouch. She sniffed it first, then sipped cautiously. It tasted metallic, but safe. She held a few drops to the baby's lips, watching as the child stirred, her mouth moving weakly against the liquid. Relief swept through Nyrie like a wave strong enough to make her dizzy. The man leaned back, watching her without staring. His eyes were quiet, deep-set, holding the kind of fatigue that only years of solitude could carve. "I'm Elon," he said at last, his voice low. Nyrie stared at him, her throat tightening. Her voice didn't feel like it belonged to her anymore, but after a long moment, she whispered, "Nyrie." He nodded once, like that was all he needed to know. The silence stretched, but it wasn't hostile. Nyrie kept her baby close, rubbing small circles on her back to coax warmth into her limbs. Elon stood and crossed the room to a battered workbench. A broken drone lay open on the surface, wires stripped and frayed like veins under a wound. He picked up a tool and began adjusting the coil as if her presence required no explanation. Nyrie's eyes darted around the room. One door, no hidden corners, no cameras. Just survival gear, patched blankets, and scraps of old tech. This wasn't the lair of a scavenger. This was something else. After a long moment, Elon's voice broke the silence again. "She's young," he said, glancing at the baby. Nyrie hesitated. 42 days? No name? She shook her head slowly. "Not yet. In Thani tradition, we wait until the third moon cycle, if they live." Her voice caught on the last word. Elon didn't flinch. She will. The certainty in his tone startled her more than any threat could have. For the first time, Nyrie allowed herself to believe it might be true. The wind roared against the walls, but inside the shelter, the silence between them felt heavier. Elon placed a folded thermal cloth near her without looking up. "You can use what you want. I don't expect anything." She blinked, unsure how to respond, and for the first time since stepping inside, her grip on the baby relaxed just slightly. Outside, the storm grew louder, battering the dome with icy fists. Inside, something softer began to throw a fragile thread of trust woven out of necessity and silence. The storm had calmed by the time Era woke again, but the quiet outside felt heavier than the howling wind had been. It was the kind of silence that pressed against the dome like a hand, testing its strength, waiting for a crack. Elon sat on the cot, hunched over a battered tablet terminal, scrolling through what was left of the outpost's registry logs. His face was lit by a thin green glow, the lines of fatigue on his brow deepening with every flicker of the screen. Nyrie sat cross-legged on the floor near the heater, gently rocking Era in her arms. The baby was warm now, swaddled in a strip of thermal cloth stitched to fit her tiny frame. For the first time since she'd been forced to flee the settlement, Ara wasn't trembling with cold. The soft sound of her breathing was enough to make Nyrie's chest ache with relief. She brushed a strand of silver hair from her face and glanced at Elon. "You watch those screens like they'll tell you the future," she murmured. Elon didn't look up. "Sometimes they do. If the registry pings this sector again, I need to know before they send someone." Nyrie's jaw tightened. "And if they do, you'll hand me over, won't you?" Another unauthorized dependent to be removed from the records. He paused, his fingers hovering over the cracked tablet surface. Then he set it aside and looked at her. His gaze was steady, not offended, but firm. "No, I don't hand people over. Not anymore. Not anymore." Her voice carried a sharp edge of suspicion. "There was a child. A human girl," he said quietly. "Mother died in a refinery collapse. Registry wouldn't process her. Too many orphans, not enough food. They flagged her as feral. I hid her in an unused module, kept her alive for 2 cycles. She was quick smart. But one day, the audits spiked and the patrols came for a sweep. I told her to run. I don't know if she made it." His voice trailed off, rough and low. Nyrie studied him in silence. There was no performance in his tone. It wasn't guilt he carried, it was something heavier, something that had hollowed him out. "You could have left," she said finally. "Why stay here, alone?" Elon shrugged slightly, looking at the heater coil. "Because I couldn't stand watching the transports fill while people like you, people like her, were turned away. I couldn't walk away from it and pretend I didn't see." Nyrie felt something shift inside her. The walls she had built, brick by brick, over months of fear and rejection, cracked just a little. She looked down at Ara, her fingers stroking the baby's soft hair. "They told me I was nothing," she whispered. "When I showed them I was pregnant, they laughed. Said I'd be another mouth to starve. Said I should have left her in the cold." Elon's hands clenched into fists. "They're wrong," he said sharply. The heater hummed between them, the silence heavy with words neither of them could fully say. After a long pause, Nyrie's voice softened. "Her name is Ara." Elon looked at her, something like relief crossing his face. "Ara," he repeated. "That's a strong name." "She's earned it," Nyrie said, holding the baby a little tighter. 42 days, no dome, no rations. "Just me. Just you," he echoed. There was no judgment in his tone. Only respect. The moment broke when the console near the hatch gave a soft, low beep. Elon was on his feet instantly, his body tense. He crossed the room, fingers flying over the keys. "What is it?" Nyrie asked, her voice tight. "A heat signature ping," he said, eyes narrowing at the display. "Our energy draw flagged an anomaly. It's not a full audit yet, but—" He exhaled sharply. "Someone's looking." Nyrie stood, clutching Era close. "If they find me here, they won't," he said firmly. "I'll scrub the data, reroute the energy logs through an abandoned sector, but I'll need time. We can't spike usage again for at least 2 days. And if Era needs more heat, then I'll make it work," Elon said. There was no hesitation, no calculation in his tone. Just conviction. Nyrie stared at him. This man, who owed her nothing, was risking everything. For her, for a child that wasn't his. She sank slowly onto the cot, her body trembling not from cold now, but from something she couldn't name. "Why?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Elon turned from the console and looked at her. His eyes were tired, but they held a steady light. "Because you shouldn't have to keep singing lullabies in the snow." Her breath caught. She had no words for that. The storm outside had quieted to a whisper, but inside the shelter, something else stirred, a fragile trust, small but undeniable. The hum of the heater coil was steady now, but its warmth felt fragile, as though one wrong move might snuff it out. Elon crouched over the console, his face lit by the pale glow of warning indicators. Each flicker of light was a reminder that the registry's eyes were still scanning, still searching. He had bought them time by rerouting the thermal usage logs through a dead storage dome, but it was a crude fix. If the auditors looked closely, they'd see the lie. Nyrie sat near the floor, Era asleep against her chest. Her hair, once matted with frost, now gleamed faintly silver under the coil's glow. She was stitching another strip of thermal cloth. With the sharp end of a scavenged pin, her fingers moving with mechanical precision. Every few minutes, she glanced at Elon, reading his posture as if the tension in his shoulders were another storm warning. "You're quiet," she said finally. "Thinking," Elon muttered without looking up. "The registry server will run a deep scan at the next cycle. If they match this dome's heat signature with our energy draw, they'll flag us. And once we're flagged—" He trailed off, his jaw tightening. "Once we're flagged, they'll come for her," Nyrie said, nodding toward Era. Her voice was flat, but the fear in her eyes was sharp. "They won't," Elon said firmly. "I won't let them." A certainty in his tone startled her. She stared at him for a long moment, then lowered her gaze back to her stitching. "You sound like you've said that before. To someone else." "I have," he admitted. "And I failed that time." The silence between them stretched, heavy and brittle. Outside, the wind had dropped to a low moan, the storm's fury spent for now. But it felt like the calm before something worse. When Elon finally turned away from the console, his face was hard, resolved. "We need to make this official," he said. Nyrie frowned. "What do you mean?" "Cohab registration. If I file us as bonded partners, the system will classify your presence as authorized. It'll stop tracking the heat spike." Her eyes widened. "You'd register me as bonded?" "It's the only way to hide you in plain sight," Elon said. He kept his voice level, but something about the way he said it carried weight. "I've done it before for others. It's not perfect, but it works if the timing's right." Nyrie didn't answer right away. Her fingers tightened around the thread. "You don't even know me. You don't know what I've done to survive. What if I bring you more trouble?" "Than the registry?" Elon stepped closer. "You're not trouble. You're someone who deserves to live. That's enough for me." The way he said it left her with nothing to argue. Before she could answer, a sharp beep cut through the room. Elon spun back to the console. His fingers danced across the keys, his breath quickening. "Damn it, the audit started early. What does that mean?" Nyrie's voice sharpened. It means someone's watching us right now, he said. If I don't mask this heat draw in the next minute, they'll know we're not empty out. Here, he yanked open a panel under the console, revealing a tangle of wires and corroded connectors. Sparks hissed as he rerouted power through an old relay, the lights dimming to a near whisper. The temperature dropped instantly, a creeping cold that made Era stir and whimper in her sleep. Keep her close, he said, his voice tight. I need 30 seconds. Nyrie clutched her daughter tighter, her gaze darting to the hatch as if expecting it to burst open at any moment. The low whine of the console's processor filled the room, followed by a series of muted beeps. Then silence. Elon exhaled slowly, leaning back from the panel. Okay, I've scrubbed the spike for now. But we can't do this again without a proper cover. We need that cohab entry. Nyrie's voice was quiet. If we do this, what happens when they see I'm not human? Elon looked at her, his eyes steady. Then they'll see you're with me. And if they want to take you, they'll have to go through me first. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she nodded once, sharp and deliberate. Do it. File it. Elon moved to the console, pulling up the form. It was a mess of boxes and codes meant to reduce lives to numbers. He filled in his name, his ID. When it asked for hers, she hesitated, then gave it. Nyrie Scholl. And the child? He asked. Nyrie looked down at Era. She has no record. Then I'll give her one, he said. The console's keys clattered softly as he typed, creating a ghost identity for the little girl. When he finished, he didn't hit submit right away. His fingers hovered over the button. This has to be timed with the audit cycle, he explained. Once I send it, we'll be bonded on record. It won't be fake anymore. Nyrie met his gaze. I understand. In that moment, something shifted between them. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was something heavier, something that felt like choosing to belong in a place the world had already abandoned. The audit cleared for now, but the reprieve felt like a thin thread stretched over a void. Elon spent the next hours pacing between the console and the heater, double-checking every line of code, every falsified energy log. Each keystroke felt like it carried the weight of all three of their lives. If the registry's secondary checks dug too deep, no trick would hold. Nyrie watched him from across the small shelter. Era bundled in her arms, the baby's soft breaths a fragile metronome against the hum of the heater. Her eyes traced every movement Elon made, and for the first time, she noticed the wear in him. The man carried silence like armor, his shoulders perpetually tense, his jaw tight, his gaze sharp but tired. He wasn't just surviving here, he was holding himself together by sheer force of will. Will it hold? She asked quietly. He didn't answer at first, leaning over the console as though his focus could bend reality. Then he looked up, his eyes meeting hers. It has to. If the registry calls for a secondary review, they'll check every heat source in this sector. And if they see an unregistered dependent, they'll erase us. She finished, her voice steady, but her arms tightened around Ara as though the mere thought of losing her child might break her ribs. Elon crossed the small space and crouched in front of her. The closeness startled her. He wasn't a man who intruded on anyone's space, but now he was there, his eyes level with hers. Quiet and fierce. They won't take her, he said. Nyrie stared at him, trying to find the lie in his voice. There wasn't one. Why? She asked, the word heavier than she intended. Because no one else saw you, he said. But I did. And I'm not walking away this time. The words lingered between them, sharp and unspoken with meaning. Her throat tightened. You're strange, she murmured. I know, he said with the faintest hint of a smile. For a moment, silence returned. But it was different now, not heavy with suspicion, but charged with something warmer, something alive. That night, The storm returned with a vengeance, slamming against the dome walls like fists. The wind howled, and the floor trembled faintly under each gust. Elon checked the seals twice, then returned to the heater, adjusting the power draw so they could endure the night without spiking the registry sensors again. "You should sleep," he said. "So should you," Nyrie replied, not looking up from Era's sleeping form. "I'll sleep after the next audit cycle," he said, his tone automatic, like someone who had made that promise to himself countless times and broken it every time. Nyrie shifted, gently placing Era into the small cradle they had made from an equipment drawer lined with stitched cloth. The baby stirred but didn't wake. She stood, stretching her arms, her movements slower now, more deliberate. "Elon," she said softly. He looked at her. The dim coil light traced the curve of her cheek, the pale strands of hair falling over her shoulder. "Do you ever stop moving? Stop fixing things? Stop pretending you're not lonely?" The question hit him harder than any storm could. He blinked, his mouth half open, but no words came. Finally, he admitted, "Not really. It's easier to work than to feel everything I've lost. And what about what's still here?" She asked, her eyes searching his. Something shifted in the air. The hum of the heater filled the silence. Elon's hands, rough and calloused, curled into fists at his sides as though he didn't know what to do with them. "I don't know how to start," he said, voice low. "You don't have to," Nyrie murmured. "I will." She stepped closer. Slow but certain, her presence radiating warmth that the heater could never match. Her hand touched his arm, just fingertips at first, testing, waiting. When he didn't pull away, she slid her hand down to his wrist, her thumb brushing over the thin scar there. Elon's breath hitched, but he didn't move. He looked at her like someone seeing sunlight for the first time after years underground. "You've been alone too long," she whispered. "And so have I." He didn't trust his voice to answer, so he let his actions speak. Slowly, carefully, he lifted a hand to her face, fingers brushing a stray lock of hair from her cheek. Her skin was warm, impossibly warm, as though life itself pulsed there. The storm battered the dome outside, but inside, the world narrowed to the space between them. Their breaths mingled, slow and unhurried. Nyrie leaned in, her forehead resting against his, her eyes half closed. "I don't know what this is," she said, voice trembling. "Neither do I," Elon admitted, "but I don't want it to stop." For the first time in years, Nyrie smiled small. Fragile, but real. She stepped closer, and when she kissed him, it wasn't desperate. It was deliberate, like two people thawing in each other's presence, finding warmth that the broken world outside could never take away. The storm raged, but they didn't hear it anymore. The heater coil glowed faintly orange, the only source of life in the room. Outside, the storm howled, a constant reminder of the dead world pressing against thin walls. Nyrie sat cross-legged near the grate, her body hunched protectively over Era. The baby's breaths had grown steadier, but every small sigh from her tiny lips made Nyrie's chest tighten. She kept checking the infant's skin, pressing her fingers gently against her cheeks and wrists, searching for warmth, for proof that she was still here. Elon moved quietly, his footsteps soft against the metal floor. He busied himself with tasks that looked mechanical but weren't urgent, wiping residue from a heating coil, replacing a cracked panel on the wall. He didn't ask questions. He didn't press her for answers. That unsettled Nyrie more than if he had interrogated her. People always wanted something. Yet this man seemed content just to let the silence settle. The shelter was small. A single cot bolted to the wall, a workbench cluttered with broken tech, and a stack of thermal cloth folded with careful precision. It smelled faintly of rust, metal dust, and recycled water. Nyrie's eyes scanned every corner, not just for threats but to understand the man who lived here. Everything about the place spoke of survival, not comfort. He had no weapons lying out, no food beyond ration bars, no clutter that hinted at indulgence or company. Is she warmer? His voice startled her, not because it was loud, but because it was so calm. Nyrie hesitated, then nodded. A little. He crouched on the other side of the heater, resting his forearms on his knees. His coat was gone now, draped over her shoulders, but the patched fabric of his shirt revealed forearms scarred from burns and frostbite. She's strong, he said, his eyes on the baby. Most don't last this long out there. Nyrie narrowed her gaze. Most? He glanced at her, then looked away. I've seen others. Some make it to the domes. Most don't. There was something in his tone grief buried under layers of practicality that made her chest tighten. She adjusted Era's wrap and lowered. Her eyes, the domes don't take people like us, not anymore. I know. Nyrie's head snapped up, suspicion flashing in her pale irises. Then why help me? Elon didn't answer right away. Instead, he shifted to the workbench and began tinkering with the broken drone again. Because no one else will, he said simply. She stared at him, waiting for more, but he offered nothing. The silence between them stretched until Ara stirred and whimpered, the soft sound shattering the tension. Nyrie instinctively rocked her, humming that old lullaby again. Her voice was softer now, less broken. Elon listened, his hands pausing on the drone's wiring. You sound like you've sung that 1,000 times, he said quietly. More, she murmured, without looking up. It's the only thing I have left. The storm outside intensified, a deep groan against the dome's weak frame. Elon's eyes flicked to the ceiling, a shadow of worry crossing his face. He rose, checking the seal on the hatch. This structure isn't built for another frost front, he said. If the wind shifts, we could lose heat fast. Nyrie hugged. Era tighter. Then what? Then we fix it, or we freeze. He said it without fear, like a man who'd accepted that choice long ago. Something about his tone made her study him differently. He wasn't a scavenger. He wasn't desperate. He was just staying alive the same way she was. That realization unsettled her more than anything else. After a moment, Elon brought over another folded cloth, laying it beside her. Dry her with this. That silk's useless in this weather. Nyrie hesitated, but she took it. She unwrapped. Era, her fingers trembling as she replaced the thin, damp fabric with the thick thermal layer. The baby's skin flushed pink under the new warmth, and Nyrie exhaled a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Elon watched quietly, not staring but noticing. He didn't look away when she caught his gaze, but his eyes softened, just slightly. You're not safe out there, he said. The patrols don't come this far, but others might. People who'll take what they want. And you? She asked sharply. What do you want? He considered that for a long moment, then answered with unsettling honesty. Just someone else breathing in this place. The heater hummed, the only sound between them for a long while. Nyrie looked down at Era, who was sleeping more peacefully now. She brushed a thumb over her daughter's soft cheek, her mind churning with distrust, fear, and a fragile thread of hope she couldn't shake. Elon returned to his bench but spoke. Again, his voice almost hesitant. You can stay here until the storm clears. After that, you decide. Nyrie didn't reply. She didn't trust him, but she trusted the warmth in her arms. For now, that was enough. The wind battered the dome like a warning, but inside the silence felt different, less like emptiness, more like the start of something neither of them could name. The storm eased by morning, but the silence it left behind was unnerving. Elon woke first, his body stiff from the cot and the warmth of Nyrie's back pressed against his chest. Era's soft breathing filled the small space like a fragile song. He didn't move at first. The night had changed something between them, not just survival anymore, but a decision, unspoken yet real. He glanced at the console, the soft glow of its monitor signaling the next audit window was approaching. When he carefully shifted to check the screen, a chill rippled through him. A new alert pulsed at the top of the display. Secondary review. Triggered. Registry Auditor 7K assigned. Elon swore under his breath. This wasn't just a random scan now. It meant the system had flagged his falsified entries. If the AI auditor drilled into their logs, it would see everything. The heat spikes, the false cohab registration, Ara's fabricated ID. Nyrie stirred, sensing the tension even before she opened her eyes. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice low but sharp. He didn't turn around immediately, fingers racing over the keys as he tried to reroute the alert. "They've seen us." "Not fully, but enough to assign a live review. We have one cycle, maybe less, before the registry requests physical confirmation." Her arms tightened instinctively around Ara. "They'll come here?" "Maybe not in person," Elon said, his tone clipped. "But the drones will. And if one scans this place..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. The room seemed to shrink around them. Nyrie stood, holding Ara close, her face hard but pale. "What do we do?" Elon stopped typing. His hand hovered over the console. "We do something I haven't done in years. We shout into the void and see who answers." She frowned. "What does that mean?" "I'm going to send a distress call," he said, turning to face her, not to the registry. "To anyone else listening, merchant ships, freelancers, humanitarian outposts. Someone out there will still respond to life signs, even if the system won't." Nyrie's brows furrowed. "You'd risk that? What if the wrong people come?" "They already have," Elon said, nodding toward the blinking audit alert. "If we do nothing, Ara won't survive the next sweep. I won't let her vanish into their files." She stared at him for a long moment, her lips parting but no words coming out. Finally, she nodded once. "Then do it." Elon's fingers flew across the console, bypassing old encryption layers and dead frequencies until he found an open relay one that hadn't been used since the Exodus. He typed in the message manually, each word deliberate. Carellan Outpost 17. Survivors. Emergency heat and medical supplies needed. 2 adults, 1 infant. Coordinates attached. He hesitated before pressing send. His eyes flicked to Nyrie. "This is your choice as much as mine," he said. "Once we send this, we can't hide anymore." Nyrie looked down at Ara, whose tiny hand gripped the edge of her wrap. She lifted her gaze back to Elon. "We stopped hiding the moment you gave me that coat." Elon hit send. The console hummed, transmitting the signal into the frozen void beyond the outpost. For a long time, nothing happened. Just the quiet beep of confirmation and the endless storm whispering outside. Then, a reply. A single line scrolled across the screen. Signal received. "Stand by. ETA minus 11 hours. Nyrie's breath caught. "Someone answered?" Elon nodded slowly, disbelief flickering across his face. "Yeah, someone's coming." The relief was sharp, almost painful. But it was short-lived. The console beeped again, this time with the cold, clinical tone of the registry's automated system. "Audit escalation. Drone deployment scheduled. Arrival ETA to 9 hours. Elon cursed under his breath. They'll get here first. The weight of the situation hit them both. Nyrie's grip on Ara tightened until the baby whimpered softly. Elon turned to the wall, pulling open a storage crate and tossing out scraps of metal and worn-out components. "What are you doing?" Nyrie asked. "Buying us time," he said. "If I can reroute the dome's heat signatures and mask our body heat with the drone wreckage, we can fool the audit long enough for the ship to arrive." For the next hour, they worked side by side. Elon scavenged old coils and emitters, while Nyrie cut and stitched thermal cloth into makeshift heat blankets. Era lay nestled in the corner near the heater, cooing softly now and then, unaware of the storm closing in. At one point, Elon's hand brushed Nyrie's as they sealed a makeshift panel. She didn't flinch. Instead, she looked at him, her silver eyes clear and fierce. "You've done more for us in 2 days than anyone has in my life," she said. Elon paused, his breath catching for a moment. "You made it this far without me. I just don't want to see you disappear." She held his gaze. "You don't know how much that matters." By dusk, they were ready. The dome's heat emissions were rigged to look like an empty structure, while a cluster of salvaged drone parts glowed faintly in the corner, mimicking a false energy signature to throw off scans. As night fell, the low hum of an approaching drone filled the air. Nyrie froze, clutching Era. Elon motioned for silence and crouched near the hatch. The scanning beam swept across the dome's exterior, humming like a predator sniffing for prey. The console lights flickered as the registry AI pinged there. "False data." "Come on," Elon muttered under his breath. "Believe the lie. Just this once." The drone's hum rose, then faded. The scanning light disappeared. A long moment passed before Elon exhaled. "It worked," he said, his voice trembling slightly. Nyrie let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Era stirred in her arms, and Nyrie kissed the baby's forehead, whispering something. Soft in the INI. 11 hours later, a faint streak of light cut across the night sky. A ship descended slowly, its landing lights sweeping across the snow-covered ruins of Carellan Outpost 17. The sound of engines, real engines, not broken wind or silence, brought Elon and Nyrie to their feet. The hatch opened and a voice crackled. "Over the external comes. Survivors located. Prepare for extraction." Nyrie looked at Elon, her eyes glistening. "We're leaving?" He nodded, a small smile breaking through his exhaustion. "Yeah, together." She took his hand. Era nestled between them, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, warmth wasn't just a dream. It was real. As they boarded the ship, Nyrie looked back at the dome. "This place, it was our grave, but you made it a home." Elon's grip tightened on her hand. "We made it a home." The engines roared, and the dome grew smaller in the distance, swallowed by snow. But for Elon, Nyrie, and Era, the cold was behind them now. They were no longer ghosts.